Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm super excited to welcome my colleague with her nifty new name, Michelle Smoley, formerly Richardson. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Happy New Year to you. Michelle, one of the things we're talking about is kind of New Year's resolutions. And I think a good one is to sort of either reestablish or establish in the first place some college savings goals. And Michelle is the perfect person to talk to us about this. She's a former financial aid officer at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine, but she's also a former vice president at Chase Student Loans and Sallie Mae. And so she knows certainly how saving for college can help you avoid having to do too much on the loan side. So I'm excited to have you here to talk about this today. I guess my first question for you is, what advice would you give to families who haven't established a college saving plan? They want to, but for whatever reason, they haven't yet. What's your best advice here?
My best advice is very simple. It's just to start. And it's okay to start small. I think it's somewhat challenging when families are looking at the cost of college, and when they look at that price tag, that any type of savings doesn't seem like it could be attainable, regardless of if they start early or later. But, just start, and it's okay to start small. Every little bit helps.
Right. Even if it's like, a dollar a day or a
Yes,
dollar a week,
exactly.
just something, right?
Hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think it's great advice because I also agree that when you look at the number that you imagine that you have to save to pay for college, it's so daunting that I think a lot of people just say, well, I'll never be able to save enough, so never mind, I'm not going to do it. But that's obviously not the way to think about it. So, with that in mind, what are some of the barriers that you see that prevent families from getting started?
Sure. One of the barriers I often see is just families getting kind of caught up in what type of account to save in. So we do have some, specific education savings accounts, but traditional savings. And so a lot of times I'll talk to families, and then I'll talk to the same families maybe 2, 3 years down the road, and they haven't started yet just because they kind of got caught up in what's the best place to save.
Hmm.
Um, Another barrier tends to be, that $1 million question of how much to save,
Yeah.
you know, and again, the cost can sometimes be prohibitive of that when you look at that, sticker price. Um, and another barrier that we often hear from families too is still that myth of, if I save for college,
Yes.
my student isn't going to qualify for need-based financial aid or scholarships. And, notice I said myth. I think we've been, debunking that myth for many, many years now. But really, saving for college is not the barrier that families have to qualify for need-based financial aid. It's
Right.
mostly parent income. So saving can only help, not hurt.
Right. I just think, please, I like to say this during many of my segments. If you take away nothing else but this would be the thing here. Savings can only help and not hurt. It could never hurt to have money in the bank to help pay for college, especially because the financial aid formula is focused on income much more so than saving. So, can only help,
Absolutely.
can't hurt. Please take that away. All right. So with that in mind, you mentioned that there's a number of savings plans out there, and that one of the things people struggle with sometimes is choosing one. So, what are the options, and maybe a little bit about what might be right for some families?
Sure. So let me start with kind of the education specific types of accounts. Families may have heard of the very popular 529 plans, or maybe a Coverdell education savings account. There's a few more restrictions with the Coverdell. So typically the 529 plan has a lot more flexibility, and it's not limited on the amount you can save per year. And you have flexibility with what types of schools um, and who within the immediate family can use that account. So the good thing about 529 plans and Coverdell's is they're a tax advantage plan. So unfortunately, we always have to tell families there's no pre-tax way to save for college.
Right.
But one of the ways to get a tax advantage with a 529 or using a Coverdell, and that advantage is you're not paying any interest, any federal tax liability on the earnings
Right.
of those accounts. Uh, there's also the traditional type of banking accounts that sometimes people don't think of. There's no tax advantage, but just starting a savings account or a certificate of deposit, a high yield money market account. You can use those types of accounts also. One thing I want to mention, kind of the difference between 529s and the other traditional types of banking accounts is if the 529 plan is funded by the parents, it's treated more favorably in the need-based financial aid formula as opposed to custodial accounts that are in, the student's name.
Right.
And another option for some families that they don't think about is a Roth IRA. You can use a Roth IRA. Yes, you're contributing post-tax dollars, but you can withdraw any contribution before the age of 59 and a half for college or any other reason without tax or penalty. So sometimes when families are worried about, oh, I'm going to save too much in a 529 plan because my student's going to get a big scholarship, is sometimes something that we hear, and oftentimes too is kind of another barrier is they think they're going to save too much. And in the 25 years I've been in this industry, I kind of have yet to see a family that has ever saved too much for college.
Right, right. I mean, the point you make is a good one, though, right? Like you could save in a 529, but you do have to use those funds to spend on education. So if you're worried that you're saving too much, right, you could do a 529 and then save more in like a Roth IRA where you can use those funds for whatever you want to use them for without penalty, regardless. And that would be a way to avoid saving too much, which, like you say, is a rarity, right?
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to the topic of, reassessing your goals and establishing your savings, college savings plan. So if you are getting to maybe a goal and you're like, ooh, maybe we're starting to save too much in that type of account, by all means, diversify.
Right. So actually, that leads to the next one, which is, what should you think about when you're setting the goals? Why is that important? And then, how should you be thinking about what the goals are that you want to set for yourself?
Sure. A lot of times when we talk about setting any type of financial goal, you'll hear about a short-term goal, which is, typically a year or less, and maybe longer-term goals, which are, 5 years or more. I think it's important for families who are maybe just starting to set a short-term goal for 1 year and then again reassess. So just pick an account, pick a dollar amount, put anything extra that you can in that account and see where you're at the end of the year. And you could start with a goal of $1,000 a year. And when you meet that goal, you get more motivated to start saving more. There's a huge psychological effect of whether you're paying off debt or whether you're saving and you're meeting those goals. Having those little attainable short-term goals can be really helpful with still having that longer term goal in the end. But again, I think focusing on the short term is better because people look at the long term, and then it just, again, seems like it's so far out there, whether it's time wise or whether it's just, thinking, oh my gosh, I got to find another place to put our money and save. So definitely, start with a plan, start with a short-term goal, with a longer-term goal, as you continue to assess each year.
Right, right. Right. If you start with a short-term plan of $1,000 and then the next year you save $2,000 and now the next year you've got $3,000, maybe you start making a longer-term plan of, well, maybe we can get to $10,000 in the next 5 years or something, right? It can build on itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that psychological piece is so real. I just think about when I'm able to save money and have been for my son's college, just how good it felt to reach that first goal and how it empowered me or motivated me is probably a better word to use to just save a little bit more the next year. And it really did build on itself. So anecdotal from me, but I believe that that's psychologically really helpful to families. For families who've already started, so they have started saving, what are some ways for them to kind of reassess their current plan as we're, opening up the new year?
Sure. I think looking at maybe a saving for college calculator can be very helpful. The calculator I like to use a lot is on the website savingforcollege.com. And it allows for you to have an inflation rate for the cost of college. It allows you to determine kind of rate of return. You can put in there the amount you currently have, and if you are doing monthly contributions or annual contributions, then you can kind of see what percentage of your goal or the cost of a 4-year public education or 4-year private education or 2-year, that how close are you to kind of the dollar amount based on those assumptions. Also, I think to maybe if you've already have a savings plan, reassessing, what type of plan you have and the amount in it. Again, maybe you need to reassess your longer term goal because of the inflation, area cost
Hmm.
of education. And so maybe what you thought 5 years ago was going to be a good goal, maybe based on what you want to save for your child or children, you might need to increase that or readjust. So I think for families who have already started, congratulations and good for you. And, it's always a good thing to kind of reevaluate this every year, whether it's at the beginning of the year or whatever, timeline you have within your family. But don't just set it and forget it.
Well, right. Because I think the other big thing too is that what you've saved, where you're at, should also impact your students' college search, right? Because, you have to be realistic about what you can actually afford, what it might mean if they apply to X school and maybe they get some financial aid, but even with financial aid, how much it's going to still cost you. Schools, one thing that I did when my son was looking at schools is I was pretty sure we weren't going to qualify for financial aid. So he really focused on schools that had merit aid. And I say we mostly because I brought to him options that I knew offered merit that I thought he might qualify for. And I was really realistic with him. And I said, this is what I can afford. And at this school, they do have merit, but even with their best merit award, it's still going to be more than I can afford. So you probably shouldn't apply to that school. But these schools, even if you don't get any merit, we could probably still swing it. And to me, that feels like such a lost piece of the process with many families, where it's sort of the sky is the limit, apply wherever, and then get in and only to discover, wow, we can really only afford this one school. Or you let your child get their heart set on a school that requires you all to go into a ton of debt. And while that wasn't what you planned, we do find a number of parents who sort of feel like, well, I can't say no now. I have thoughts about that. But either way,
Mhm.
why let yourself get to that point, right? Be much more realistic right from the beginning.
Absolutely. I think, just to piggyback off that is we're speaking with families now who maybe did early decision, early action. They might have gotten into their school and now they're scrambling for scholarships
Yeah,
because they didn't qualify for need based, they didn't save, or they didn't save enough and to cover a significant portion. And so now they're kind of scrambling. And
right.
and in the end, they will probably end up, a lot of them will have to borrow.
Yeah. Right. Who maybe didn't want to borrow. And I can tell you, you're doing it wrong if you're looking for scholarship dollars after you've committed to a college. That is, you've got to flip that order. So,
Absolutely.
Michelle, any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover about this topic, or we got it?
I think we got it. I think, in short, again, kind of to reiterate what you said, if you take away a couple things from this segment, just start to save for college. It's okay to start small, and it will only help, not hinder your student's journey to college, wherever they go.
Yes, love it. Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right, we are going to go to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about how admissions officers read files. Going to give some insight, courtesy of a couple of former admissions officers, me included. So don't go away.